Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us here in virtual space to help the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba say thank you and farewell to the exhibition by Casey Adams, Gage'gajiwaan, which the AGSM has been hosting virtually since last May 2020. My name is Lucy Letterhandler. I am the current curator here at the AGSM, and I would like to be sure to acknowledge my predecessor, Alyssa Farron, who is the curator for this exhibition, and who did a really masterful job, I think, adapting it to a virtual format, and who you will see at the end of this video as well. Before I invite Casey onto the screen to introduce this talk, I would like to position myself, for one, in as much as I'm the personification of the gallery at the moment, and to honor the place in which I am physically. It is Treaty 2 territory, which is the traditional shared lands of the Anishabe, Oji-Cree, Cree, Dene, and Dakota peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. Furthermore, I was inspired by the conversation you're about to see to position myself in a more personal or abstracted way and say that I am from the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean of the Middle East coast of Turtle Island, in particular from my formative years spent on the unceded lands of the Aztec people and the Anacostans near what is now called Washington, D.C., as well as the years spent on the unceded territories of the Wampanoag, Nipmuc, and Massachusetts people, for whom the present-day state of Massachusetts is named. Finally, I would like to thank and to mourn, in a way, the water that makes all of this possible. So as we are grateful for the tools that we're given today to stay connected and to share with one another, we also acknowledge our complicity in the environmental impact of hydroelectricity. As you watch today, I hope you'll understand this experiment in a different kind of acknowledgement, and I would encourage you to reflect on which lands your feet walk on, as well as which waters flow within you. You can share your thoughts with Casey and myself through the comment function wherever you are joining us from now, and we will get a chance to respond at the end of this talk. So now I'm going to take a back seat and I'll invite Casey to join me up here.
Tansei. Thank you, Lucy. That was really beautiful. I actually started feeling a little choked up just listening to you talk about water that way. It was really beautiful, and I just perfectly summarized a lot of my feelings and concerns about Nibe. So I think it was a really wonderful introduction to what we're going to be, what we had talked about in the past for last year. I guess it was last year that I sat with Sherry Copenance and Aimee Craft, two people that are part of the Nibe annual Nibe gathering, and we talked about the importance and the welfare of water. So yeah, thank you. So I just, what's really wonderful about the fact that we're going to be playing this over again is because there is going to be another water gathering, but this time we had to cancel it last year, which was unfortunate, but we decided that we were going to do it this year, but due to the restrictions that have been happening and making sure that people are safe, we decided to put the water gathering virtually and online. So if anyone is interested in watching the water gathering, they can go onto Facebook and go to look for Nibe Gathering 2021. And there you'll find information on how to watch the gathering, which is going to be May 27th to the 30th. It's coming up Thursday to, well, technically we're going till Sunday. And there's going to be virtual lessons on water that people can tune into and watch. What's really great about this is that we bring elders from this region, and especially Treaty 3 territory. And we have those elders conduct workshops and teach the next generation about water. And it's really great. And for myself, I'm going to be conducting a clay workshop on how to make an Indigenous vessel, because clay could not be possible without water. Water breaks down the rocks. It breaks it down into tiny, tiny, tiny particles. And the water and the clay particles come together and make that clay. And so I'm going to be conducting a workshop on Indigenous pottery, and I'm going to be showing you how you can make it at home. There are 2 videos that I made in preparation for this workshop, and it really talks about making connections to the land. And how you do that is that I'm getting you to go out to the land and harvest your own clay and then process it for the gathering. And then together we can build a vessel, just like my ancestors did. So it's really exciting. That's going to be happening Thursday, where we build the vessel. So it's been raining, which has been wonderful here in this territory. I know in Brandon, it has been raining as well. And fortunately, Manitoba has clay almost everywhere. And so you can easily dig up clay. You just have to dig not even a foot to 2 feet into the ground, and you're going to find clay right away. So that's really brilliant about Manitoba. But just to talk a little bit about this Anishabe Gathering 2021, we're calling it Honoring the Sacredness of Birthing Water, because women are carriers of water, and women are responsible for Anishabe. And this 4-day gathering centers around Gage'gajiwaan. Water is life, or everything needs water to live, and reflects on 3 areas: Rebroadcasting, living a good life, and Nene. I'm going to brutalize this. Sorry, Nindegawinimdog. All my relations, and Anishabe, the language. So there you go. So it's going to be running for a short time, because we don't want people to get tired of being online. We know what it's like. So it's every day starting Thursday from 1 o'clock until 5 o'clock. So that's really exciting. And just to say that, I'm so appreciative of the fact that you're rebroadcasting this, because this exhibition really came out of the Anishabe Gathering. All the knowledge that I had been learning from elders, in particular Sherry Copenance, a lot of the elders who were in the teaching lodge out on the land in the Whiteshell area and Bannock Point. Just over the years, the teachings that they were bringing to me, I felt that responsibility. I felt that responsibility to give a voice to water and to Anishabe. And I really wanted to create artwork that gave it a visual voice, gave it the ability to tell stories of the importance of water and how we need to protect it. And I'm really, really pleased with how it came out, because we were doing it virtually. It allowed me to take Sherry Copenance's voice and put it over each piece. So each piece has a teaching by Sherry, but she speaks it in her language. And I didn't put a translation on it, because I felt it was important just to hear her words and have the words flow over you like water flows over rocks. So I've just been so pleased with how AGSM was able to accommodate that, and how we were able to come together and still create an exhibition that I'm really happy and pleased about.
Great serendipity. And so we'll remind people that you can still visit the show via the AGSM website as a current exhibition until, I believe, Saturday. and then it will transfer.
And then after that, you can see it on my website.
Yeah, and yeah, just a real serendipity to watch those paintings really come alive with because it follows the kind of traces the lines, you know, as it moves around.
Right. Thanks.
So, would you like to play this talk, and I'll see you in a little while?
Yes, I look forward to our conversation, and
okay.
hopefully people will have some questions.
Yes, yes. Again, in the comment function wherever you're logging in from. Okay.
Ahondene magnetaga nijo sex agamakwe waseas muktigo atikdotem. Etiganing dishitigo honigi mingi tijombig ego. Oegat kunnak migun, oeno kumisiban minig ea. Oetishkit kunnak chite boyan, oeno ungumgai, kawe noyan, etagoistoge wikagis taguzian. Ge Nizega ya watatsuka ndak memendigego oega gajat sit manitu. Oige geninge nan, oige hatsuka ndak kokomitsna nigimishum senani gen sundana makaya wat winoa genigego niganshkana. Winoa ngagogwechimag pebeka chinenimigo yanga etugoe watishindamang. Wenungo me pichik chinen dagok oenibe. Wesagoge we guas sabakun gajin kategen. Kanishnape kanishnabe nwe mitishkeni nintke ichinen miguan ganishna mini nintke I kabi unje besaguyan mi nweang me kitoang kigowan. Aha kimigwe chinen men so bebe shigoi keginwa magi bitoig oege gejeat tizinia. Wesigo genga migwe chiag gege atsu kanimiag. We kenige gogab matizimagab gege mash beminga yawat. Aha kchimigwach kitinin men so bebe jigoik. Oetish pagi ganejagana shimtan. Just acknowledging all of you who have joined us today. I have 3 Anishinaabe names, but my English alias is Sherry Copenance. I come from Ojibways of Onigaming, which is on the east side of Lake of the Woods. I belong to the Elk Clan. I also work for that good and kind-hearted lodge, the Medewan Lodge. Just expressing gratitude and to ask for the support and the kindness of those spiritual beings as we begin this talk in a good way, and even the lands that and the waters that each of us are upon or close by. I acknowledge all of that, and for them to think of us in a kind and supportive way as we that good and kind-hearted spirit, that earth we call our mother, those spirits that sit at the 4 winds, the sky, the earth, and the water realm. Just for them to support us and to lead us in the words that we're to share with you. And the feather I was holding was given to me by my late grandmother. So I felt like I needed to hold that today, and whatever I was saying with you, that it's the truth. It's the truth. And so that's what I was, and that's what I was basically saying, and just for all of us to be thought of in a good way as we speak about and share about the sacredness and importance of water, and even with the birch bark. In the dialect I come from, we call those birch bark scrolls wibasagakun. So that's, and I acknowledge and make appeasement to each and every one of you and your spirit helpers, and thank you all for joining us and for bringing your kindness, your curiosity, your imagination, all of that to today's discussion. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sherry. Why don't we actually start with Sherry? Why don't you talk a little bit about yourself before we start our discussions, and then Aimee, and then I'll talk about myself as well.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm from Ojibways of Onigaming, which is on the east side of Lake of the Woods. That's where I was born and raised. I currently live in Kenora, but I've always been around grandmas, the aunties, the grandpas, the uncles. I'm fortunate that I still speak my original language, Anishabe. And to me, that's what's kept me grounded as to who I am as an. I guess it was always spoken of, and the ways we take care of the water, the ways we acknowledge the water, and even because where I come from, we didn't even get any running water till I was like 15 years old.
Wow.
So I knew all of the hard work that we had to do to get the water from the lake, from Lake of the Woods, when it was still drinkable, still potable. I remember the hard work that me and my younger sister had when we helped our mother go and fetch the water from the lake. And in the winter time, we had to chop through the ice to get to it.
Wow.
And it was always our work to do that. And even like to have a simple thing as having a bath, right? Like warming up that water on the wood stove and all the work that it took. So for me, and even acknowledging that spirit, we were always told not to ever take that for granted, to always that it's not a privilege, but it's just like your, I guess your favorite auntie or your favorite grandma. You just look after it like that and treat it like that. And it's a being just like us. And that's what I was always taught, that it has a spirit, a heart, mind, and body. So just like how we make our own decisions, so does that water. So we have to acknowledge that and do our best to work with that and work with them like how we work with each other in the human being realm. So that's, and I come from a huge extended family. Water, we've always lived by water. Everything we did, like, going fishing, hunting. I just watched them trap and watched the skinning, and when they'd stretch out the animals. So all of that, and even how we took care of that, and even with our rice camps, like I'm grateful I was raised up that way, and I still remember that, and how we process anything that comes from water in our own ways. I still carry that, even though I don't do it as often as I probably should be. But even the importance of birch bark, like how we use that in our everyday life, and how we still have those birch bark scrolls that have survived through centuries, and I wouldn't even guess how many years, and how some people can still read those original writings, those original symbols.
Wow.
And how even though they might be hundreds of years old, I don't know, maybe more, they're pristine, they're in pristine condition, and we still have people who can write those. So it's only fitting for me when I see new Casey doing that work on the birch bark. It brought back to like how our ancestors generations ago, I wouldn't even put a number to it, because I know some people say 7, but I think it's even beyond and more than that.
Mm-hmm.
How they thought of us way back then, and how we would be bringing that to now and into the future, and how that would guide each and every one of us. And even in an art form, because really art was part of all of that. It wasn't just its own separate thing, it was just all encompassing in our everyday way of life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit about me. That's why I'm here. I have high regard for all of those, all of our relatives that have been brought forth in this exhibit. So miigwech.
Miigwech. Aimee?
First, I just want to say how lovely it is to be here. And I don't get to be in the same physical space as both of you anymore, but I'm really happy to be at least in this room, this chat room. It's kind of exciting, and really glad that people can join us. I wish we could see you. But hopefully, when we meet again, I will have an opportunity to have some conversations about the things that are being discussed today, about the work that you've put forward, Casey. It's just a great opportunity to further some of that knowledge. And like Sherry was saying, we all come to this from our own perspective and our own place and our relationships with water. And mine is as a Treaty 1 person, having grown up in this territory, being in this territory now, understanding that responsibility to the water that I feel that I belong to. So often I'll talk about, belonging to a place and belonging to water as jurisdiction. So what's my responsibility in relation to those places? And for me, it's the two lakes where I spent most of my childhood, Lake the Woods and Lake Winnipeg, and thinking about that as how my responsibility is framed, and also being really part of who I am and where I come from. And so I was trained as a lawyer, and now I work at the University of Ottawa. I have said that I'm a refugee from Ottawa right now. I'm in the best place to be in the world, which is Southern Manitoba and Treaty 1 territory. And living in, with my family, my extended family, in the water of our territory and around the water of our territory. So it's kind of fitting to have this discussion being in the place that I grew up in and that I love so much. I've lived in 27 different places in my life,
Wow.
which seems like a lot, but I have done the math, and it was funny to come to the realization that never in my life have I lived more than 3 blocks away from the water. And so that's in all kinds of different settings, middle of cities, but always really close to the water, and seeing it as a relative and something that is incredibly healing, and something that we always want to keep in mind is how to maintain those relationships with water in all its different forms and in all the places that we live. So, for me, when I moved to all these different places, it's been greeting the water and just asking it for that life that it gives. On the subject of birch bark and this beautiful exhibit, it's fun because often I wear these birch bark earrings, and people will compliment me on them all the time. They were made by my good friend Leona Starr. And what's funny is that with humidity they curl, and in dry times they straighten. And sometimes one of them, if my hair is wet, is going to be curled, and the other one not. And I always tell people, like, these are living things. These are my very important part of my day when I put these earrings on, not only because they're made by someone that I know that, out of love, but also because that birch bark continues to have life and to hold that water and to be in relationship with water. So I'm really excited to see and engage with this work, and to have listened to Sherry, speak to each of the pieces was an amazing journey, in terms of language and reflection on the teachings that come with each of the pieces and on the journey. So I'm really happy that we have the chance to chat about that today. So miigwech.
Miigwech. Tansei, tutimak, kapapama pimanat makisuasquayo, netisuikeso. Ni Mama Judy Adams, Isidi Geso, Ochekewe Sipi, Ni Itutimak. So I said, my Cree name is Flying Overhead in Circles Eagle Woman. Hello, all my relations. My mother, I come from my mother, and she comes from Fisher River. And I just it's very important when I do an introduction that I acknowledge where I come from, because you can't know where you're going until you know where you come from. And so I like to acknowledge my mother, Judy, every time I introduce myself. So I'm really excited that the three of us are together. One of the reasons why I created this work was because of these beautiful women that are in this chat with me. It started with the Nibe gathering, and I'm going to get both the ladies to talk a little bit about that. But at the Nibe gathering in White Shell, I absorbed all of this information, and it's like what Sherry said, how art was art was a part of all of kind of intertwined with everything else that we were doing. So songs was important, but so was art. And we showed it in the objects that we wore. We showed it in the moccasins and the dresses that we made, the spiritual objects that we created. A lot of time and effort was put into these creations. And I feel that I'm following in the footsteps of my ancestors by taking that same idea. Knowledge is infused into these art pieces, and that's one of the inspirations is knowledge and water. And I like to think that I look to the past to understand where I came from. My feet are basically placed on the ground in the present, and I'm looking to the future for future generations. So I like to think that this work represents those three different levels. But first, I was really inspired by the water gatherings and the knowledge that I received and absorbed during that time, and the relationships that were created. So I wanted to maybe pass it off to Aimee, who started the Nibe gatherings, helped organize them. So if you want to talk a little bit about what the Nibe gathering is and where it is, and that would be great.
Sure. So I didn't start it. There's a whole bunch of energy that came together to make that gathering happen. I just happened to be the workhorse who got shin splints running around trying to make sure that things got done, and I'm quite honored to have been given that role. In 2013, we had the first gathering, and it was actually part of a research project that I was a small part of. It was called Clean Water for First Nations, Clean Drinking Water for First Nations. And within that larger project, I developed a smaller project on Anishabe, Gage'gajiwaan, thinking about what is our law, what are Anishabe laws relating to water, and had a first gathering in Rosa River. And then part of the vision that came from there in assembling the elders and having those discussions about water teachings and water stories and Anishabe law was that there should be a lodge devoted to this learning, and that it should bring all people together, and that there would be an opportunity in that space to commit to acting for the water and taking on responsibility. And so after that 2013 gathering, there was a vision by one of the elders within the lodge to create the second lodge, or the Nibe Lodge in the Whiteshell at the Manitowoc site near Bannock Point, because that's connected to the petroforms that are there. So in September 2015, the first lodge was built there, and it's been renewed. So it's actually been taken down. This is a wigwam, like a traditional teaching lodge that's built from tree saplings, and that is built in ceremony. And I think each of us has been part of building both of those lodges, along with a lot of other people. And, you know, that's really the key message, is that all of the people that are supposed to be part of sharing in that knowledge and those teachings come together to do that work, right? To work for the water. And it's been really amazing to see with the annual gatherings. People come from other regions, other countries, and assemble in this lodge. That's an open lodge. It's for teaching, and it's for all people to be welcome in. The only, you know, quote unquote requirement is that people be committed to that relationship and that love to the water, and come with an open mind, open spirit to learn and to share what they have also. And then to commit to that ongoing action that they're going to take for the water. And you know, there is a commitment to 4 years, and like anyone who does research knows, you know, the funding was set for that period of time, and then the gathering was picked up, and external sources, continuing contributors have said that they would continue to support the gathering, and now it's organized by the First Nations Health and Social Secretariat of Manitoba. So that's really a great development there. And throughout the years, the format of the Nibe Gathering has changed and evolved, and some pieces have stayed constant. And one of those is your contribution, Casey, of working with the clay and helping people to develop their relationship with that knowledge, and also with the clay itself, and understand the relationship between clay and water. And Sherry's been one of the lead grandmothers that has helped us, develop the annual themes and bring people together, and to help with the organization of that gathering. And it's just a beautiful place and space. And it's really unfortunate that we're not there today.
I know.
But hopefully, in the near future, people will have, the opportunity to travel again and be able to participate in the next year's gathering. And I had a thought. I thought maybe next year we should make it twice as long to catch up.
Oh, I like that. Sherry, the Nibe Gathering has been scheduled for next year. They already came out with the date on Facebook. Can you talk a little bit about your roles and responsibilities, and what people can expect when they come next year?
So for me, it's just adding to what Aimee has already said. It's like a group of knowledge holders came together and supported that Nibe Gathering, and of course the subsequent ones after that. But also there's been a group of grandmothers that have remained constant and been giving, and other ones are welcome as well, because we're very welcoming as well to anybody. And one of the first things that we've always said is also to include all 8 people across the lifespan, like right from birth to old age, and even anybody from the human family is welcome there. So for me, it's been supporting that work, and at times, having a primary focus on what we might be speaking to that particular year, and even how we're going to act upon whatever theme that we've all agreed to. And so for me, that's been my responsibility, and even with the ceremonial piece, like assisting with that, and making sure that if my help is needed, that I'm there as well. So for me, that's and I'm glad that a couple of years ago, or last year, I was finally there to help assist with the actual rebuilding of the lodge that stands there now. And so for me, it's all been a part of that, and how we all work together. And I've always I guess shared my voice about, because for Anishinaabe people, it's the women that lead the work for the water, but we don't say we do that in isolation, just ourselves. We need our men, our children, our older people to help us in that work. But it's us who take that lead in how we ceremonialize the water, how we sing for the water, how we speak for the water, how we act for the water. And basically, it's how we take care of the water. And when we do that, that water will take care of us.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how kind or how powerful that water may be, we acknowledge that. So for me, that's been my role. So I'm fulfilling my womanly role to take that lead, and with other women to do the work we need to do for that water, and bringing people in to help us do that work.
Yeah. Thank you, Sherry. I was very fortunate to sit in one of Aimee's class at the University of Ottawa. And I would actually like you to talk a little bit about, how you said Western legal systems, really, it talks about individualism and really about property, kind of protecting property. And can you explain to everybody the difference between Indigenous law and how it differs to Canadian law?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of differences. I think the overarching similarity that makes both law is that they're meant to help us govern interactions between beings. And I think part of the difference is how we look at who are beings as part of the law. And, when you think about Western legal systems, they're really oriented around individuals and that being human beings, and then the protection of private property for the purposes of human beings. And then when you contrast that with what the pillars or foundations of Indigenous legal systems are, and I'll use Anishabe law specifically, you're looking at a system that, or a way of life actually, which we are reminded of constantly, that it's not a theory or a philosophy, it's a way of life that is articulating a very different set of values. So a sense of collectivity and relationships with a lot more than human beings. So thinking about other parts of creation as our relatives that are part of those legal relationships, and then put that towards the objective of maintaining good relationships and having minupamatsuan or bimatsuan, a good life, a collective good life and well-being. So if, when you're directly contrasting those as foundations of an individual with a right to hold property versus this idea that we have responsibilities and relationships with each other and that we try and live well together, there's a huge contrast there in how you approach quote unquote the management of those relationships through law. I think it's important to acknowledge that because we have a lot of spaces in which those two systems of law come into conflict. We're seeing that with the Wet'suwet'en and their initiative to try and protect land and territory, not only for their own purposes, but for the other parts of their territory, other beings that are part of that long-standing relationship since time immemorial. We saw it in examples like Standing Rock, where you have one group of water protectors that are working according to this foundational principle that water is life, and trying to protect that water and take responsibility for it, and another system that's confronting it that looks at private property, laws of trespass, and civil disobedience as being the governing law of Western systems. So more and more we're in this context where we're having these two systems of law that have different foundations, different values as part of them, kind of butting up against each other. And that makes this such an important issue to be discussed and resolved in this era, is this conflict between these systems of law, and which of them do we think is going to support our sustainable future, our way of moving forward together, and the collective wellness. Well, one of them is based on collective wellness, so I'm kind of leading to which one I think is the better of the two,
and guiding us in a good way for our future. I think what's interesting is how there are communities all over the world. In fact, even a county in the United States that is connected to Lake Erie had declared that water is a living thing and that it has rights. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a movement around the world towards the recognition of what started out in the 1970s under the language of rights of nature. So recognizing that even though natural elements couldn't necessarily speak for themselves, that they had rights and that humans had an obligation to, or right to, enforce those rights on behalf of those beings. It kind of started with forestry, and it has moved very much towards water and the protection of water in the last years. And I actually have a personal project right now where I've worked with women from Lake Winnipeg, specifically from Grand Rapids, and we've harvested some of the water there and taken it to some of the places in the world where there's a recognition of legal personhood of water bodies, and done an exchange of water. Because as much as it's great to recognize legal personhood and rights of beings of nature, It's not quite the same thing as what Anishabe law provides for, which is a recognition that water has a spirit, it has agency, it will decide for itself. And legal personhood is a different concept. We actually use it in law to recognize the rights of corporations. So, you know, whether or not that's the best mechanism, it is a legal mechanism, and it certainly forces governments and industry to kind of take notice of water and recognize that, you know, the things that are harmful to water may be considered illegal in a constitution or by the courts or in legislation across the world. For example, in New Zealand, the Wanganui River, in India, the courts have recognized that the Ganges and the Yamuna rivers are sacred. They need protection. In the Atrato in Colombia, you know, recognition through the Supreme Court of that country. But thinking about that and trying to unpack it and look at it from an Indigenous perspective, do we want water to have the same rights as corporations? Maybe not. Like, it might be a little bit more nuanced than that. And I think that discussions like this one are important, and the teachings from the Nibe gathering and from the lodge, and trying to really understand, okay, what does the spiritedness of water and those spirits that look after water and the different forms of water, how is that different than a Western legal concept? And maybe the Western legal concept is a way to actually recognize that. And that's kind of the project that I'm doing by going to all of those rivers and asking that question and doing the water exchange. I'm actually trying to embody Anishinaabe law by asking the water itself. So exchanging the water, putting the water, what I say is like putting it into conversation with other water bodies and asking for it to provide its own answer. Like, is this something that's desirable for Lake Winnipeg? But asking that water to do the work or to help guide the work that it would want us to do. So it sounds a little bit abstract, but I think that if you believe in the teachings of that spiritedness and agency of water, you can understand how water would be able to provide that direction.
Right. You know, the things that I've been learning is that water is life. Water, we can't survive without water. Water is everywhere. Water has a history. It has a spirit. It has memory. And how we're all connected. I'm thinking of Dr. Leroy Littlebear, who often talks about this connection that flows everywhere. And in many ways, that's the epitome of what water really is. It's in our air, it's in our bodies, it's in all living things. It's traveling over our grandfathers. So I just want to talk a little bit maybe from Sherry about how important it is to protect these waters and what is our roles and responsibilities as people to protect the waters.
For me, I just want to add to what's all been said today, and I think that's one of the fundamental differences between Western law and I can only speak to Anishinaabe law to the place where I come from, because you know Anishinaabe are vast, eh? Like we go all the way west to Alberta, all the way north to Gage'gajiwaan, Pangasi, all the way south to the ones who were forced to relocate, like Oklahoma, all the way east. So we're a vast people, and even the way I think fundamentally, though, we all know that the common thing is that we know sacred water is life. We know it to be sacred. We know it to be life-giving, life-sustaining, and life-taking, right? We know all of that. So that when we do speak to the water, we acknowledge, you know, the life it brings us, and we also ask that water to be kind to us, because we know at times it can take our life as well, like, you know, and even I remember at one time when it was so stormy and we couldn't go on the lakes, I was kind of upset about that, but I was told to be grateful to that water, that it needed to do that work, you know. But as a young person, sometimes you don't realize those things or think about those things. And so for me, it's like what I've already said, we're born with that. Sometimes we forget, sometimes we stray away from that, of what our relationship is to that water. And like I said, it's our responsibility to take care of that water, like how you would your favorite human being on this earth. So think about who your favorite human being is and how you would fulfill your roles and responsibilities to take care of them in the best way possible. That's the same thing with water. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can do it like spiritually. You can do it with your heart, like what Aimee was saying. Talk to that water and see if you can feel its emotions, and can they feel your emotions. Then even mind, like come to understand what that water is thinking. And then even the body of water, like when it's calm, when it's powerful, when it's like 2-foot waves, like what is that about,
Yeah.
all of that, and how you take care of that. So for me, it's like you can do that by talking to it, by singing. Maybe you want to be what people call a protector, or some people say activist, but really it's a protector. There's many ways that people can fulfill that, and for me, it can be as simple as acknowledging that water within you and all around you, and being open to hearing it, like even going beyond your 5 senses,
Yeah.
really
I-
going beyond that, and really hearing, listening, and speaking to it in that way. So for me, that's how it is. And for Anishinaabe, that was right from the beginning. We were told that and I remember this grandmother saying, when I was in my younger years, she said, she was telling us like creation, and she said water was here before everything. And then I thought, in my mind, my intellectual, I thought, well, how could that be? Like, and then I thought about, those four levels of the sky realm much later, not right away. And I thought, oh yeah, that's true. That's so true. It was here first before everything else. And then NASA said they found water up in the universe like a few years ago, but we already knew that. And
Yeah.
that water was here before everything. So it's true. But in my intellectual mind, I couldn't comprehend that as a younger woman. But as I started to grow older, I said, yeah, that's so true. She was speaking the truth. And I'm glad that our knowledge holders, our grandmothers and our grandfathers, still share those things with us. And just a simple statement like that gets you to think,
Right.
and maybe act in a different way or similar way as our ancestors. Those are all things that's individual to us, but when we do something individual, it affects everything collectively, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's how we protect water in our own way, and everybody can do that. It's not only certain people, it's everybody.
I think one of the reasons why this whole artwork happened was because how those teachings really affected me. Like I didn't grow up with my culture. I'm part Cree, part Ojibwe, and so I was raised with this economic structure as more important than the land. Property was more important than the living creatures that live on the land, and so forth. And so I think what the water gathering did for me was it completely changed my relationship with land and water, especially water. I had been working with clay since the mid 90s, and I never made that connection between land and water with the clay until I was out on the land and digging clay from the land. And it changed my relationship and made me understand how those connections exist. And I think one of the things that is really important for people to understand is that the first step you can make as a person is come to the water gatherings and then learn but also change the way you think about water and land and the creatures that exist within that environment. And Aimee, you said something really beautiful to me one time. You said that you sing to the water. You turn on your tap, you pour water, and you realize how grateful you are that this exists for you and that you have clean water, but you also sing to the water every day. And I think that's one of the things that you can do as a person who has to think 7 generations ahead. We have to think about the future. Aimee, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think acknowledging where your water comes from is important, right? Because part of that is what are the impacts of the water that we take and the water that we put back in our everyday lives. And the water we put back is just as important as the water that we take. And I just want to underline that. And, you know, when I lived in Winnipeg, every day I was grateful to the water that came from Shoal Lake and the people that live there and the sacrifices they've made and how that's had an impact within their territory. And on their water and the safety of their own drinking water. So, you know, having that relationship and thinking of the relationship we have with water and singing to it as part of what we put into our body and that good energy. And we're taught that at a very young age is when you prepare things or when you consume things, the energy that's in that, it becomes part of you. And so that you need to take that, you know, that seriously. You have to take that into consideration and think about one of the things that I think of when I travel is how when I put water from other places into my body, it has an effect on me as a person, spiritually and emotionally and physically. And I don't know about intellectually. I'll have to give that some thought. But you know, it definitely has a resonance. Given, you know, when you think about how much water is in our body, that's huge. So yeah, acknowledging that relationship and saying good and kind things to it, to that water, and expressing gratitude. You know, that's a form of prayer that adds to what Sherry was saying about the different ways that we can express that gratitude and take responsibility.
And I suppose once you start taking that responsibility and start creating that relationship, then you can start using the Western structure system by lobbying, right? Becoming protectors by maybe even placing yourself within government and working the system.
Yeah, so I co-lead a big research group that's called Decolonizing Water. And you can go see the website and look at some of the projects we've worked on, some of the videos that explain, like, for example, the Anishabe gathering is part of one of those videos. And Sherry and I have worked on the Anishabe Declaration of Treaty 3 that was put forward by the Women's Council of Treaty 3. And all of those things that we do to help, you know, decolonize water governance is really about trying to bring Indigenous ways into the decision-making process of governments and corporations and individuals, and thinking about those sets of values and those responsibilities in relation to, so that's the sets of values and principles that informed the Anishabe Declaration. And if anyone wants to look at it, at the declaration itself, it's on the Grand Council website. It's also on the Decolonizing Water website. And yeah, it's a list of, and it's not all of it. It's not the whole understanding about that relationship with Anishabe, but it's a good start and a good place to get some of that understanding. I wanted to share just one quick story, if that's okay, about there's a lady who comes to the Anishabe gathering regularly, and she'd gotten a copy of this declaration. And you can actually print out copies online, and it's a beautifully designed format, and it has a logo that represents all of creation that was done by Danielle Morrison, who's from Gage'gajiwaan Treaty 3. And so this lady said to me that her son has a copy of the declaration beside his bed, and that every night he thanks the water and prays for the water. And this was his own initiative. And he's kept doing that for, you know, ever since that he got this copy of the declaration, and he expresses his love and gratitude. And it really, I found that really touching, that a young boy who has, you know, this really deep understanding of what it is to have that care and that love, was able to express it in that way and be supported by his mom, and to see it through the declaration.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm wondering if we should invite Alyssa back and see if she has any questions from the. Hello.
Pops up. Hi. Yes, thank you for that discussion. I'm just like, taking notes like really furiously as we're all talking. So I wanted to just moderate a Q&A. We don't have too many questions from the audience, although we have a lot of really wonderful comments from people who are just adoring everything that you're all saying as you're talking. But I do have a couple of questions of my own that maybe we can get into.
That'd be great.
Cool. So my first question is around what's the water situation like in your own communities? So where I'm based now in Brandon, Manitoba, the situation is such that there are some communities here that have relatively high levels of lead in the water, particularly in downtown Brandon, which is also where the art gallery happens to be located. And it's been a pretty significant problem in the city, in my community, for a number of years. And so I'm just curious to find out a bit more about, what's the situation like in your own communities, wherever you're based and located?
Maybe I can go first. I currently live in Kenora, Ontario, so I'm still on Lake of the Woods. It has been hugely affected, like we can't drink directly from it. I don't know if people still do, but I know I don't. So it has to get treated before we drink it, but it's still a beautiful, beautiful lake, and I see lots of people on it, and we still go wild rice picking, we still go fishing. In fact, I had a pickerel dinner there just a few nights ago from the fish my granddaughter caught. So we still use that, but on the community Ojibways of the Onigiming, we're in between two lakes, Lake of the Woods and Crow Lake is a spring-fed lake, and that one, we say that's the best drinking water ever. So some people take it when they go traveling, but that one is, you could still drink from it. Some people, we still treat it though. So for that, but I know there's mining now coming into that area or in that area, so I don't know how it will affect the groundwater, like the spring water. So that's the state of water, but we still do our best. We still have our ceremonies, and we do it differently. Yeah, like every Anishabe people might do things differently, but the thing is to do your ceremonies in regards to water, and even to sing for that water. And where we're from, the women take that lead, but men sing songs too, like on the big drums. And so for us, it's still doing that work on behalf of ourselves and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a couple of things I'd like to add, and thanks for Sherry for talking about the different forms of water and where they come from, and I think that there's a misconception if we look only at drinking water, because drinking water and sanitation is related to the overall health of the water, and abstracting it from that I think is difficult and problematic in some cases, but I think clean drinking water and sanitation for First Nations is definitely a key issue. And we're seeing that especially in this COVID context. If people are being told that the primary instructions are to wash your hands, but people don't have clean water to do so, that poses a significant health risk. And there was a commitment by the federal government to end all long-term boil water advisories by March 2021. So we're quickly creeping up on that date, and there are still 61 ongoing long-term drinking water advisories in First Nations in Canada, out of 634 First Nations in Canada. And those are the long-term ones. Those are not the something happened, boil your water for a period of time. This is extended periods of time. So, I think that dimension is important to think of people that don't have access to clean water, and that's pretty significant on reserves in Canada. It has an impact on health. But to the broader question of the state of water, I think that Sherry, you were talking about Lake of the Woods and how it's changed, and it's changed in your lifetime, it's changed in my lifetime, and thinking about all of those things that have impact on water and not just drinking water. And drinking water as a human right, because then we kind of lose track of the water that is part of the life of all of the rest of creation. So all of those things are closely tied together, and our relationship with water and the health of water is probably the key issue for our generation, especially with the idea of commodification of water and the sale of water. Some of the elders that participated in both the gathering and the declaration work had said there were prophecies about this time where we'd be we would be buying water, which probably seemed ridiculous 100 years ago, but they were certain that day would come, and it's here. It's here now.
Yeah, and I also think about how Manitoba Hydro, growing up, I always believed that it was a clean energy. And both Aimee and myself went on a hydro tour up north and met with community members who were impacted by Manitoba Hydro, who utilizes the water and changes the environment. And it completely disrupts not just the people who live in that region, but also the animals, the plants, the fish. It's really devastating. And even I remember as a child, even just swimming in Lake Winnipeg, and it used to be crystal clear. And once the hydro dam was built, and also all the many of the swampy areas on farmland were drained, and everything is now quickly run into the Lake Winnipeg, we see a significant change in algae blooms. And eventually what will happen, even though the fish are prospering from the algae, the algae blooms build up, they die, they go down onto the ground under the water, and they starve the creatures with oxygen. And so we could potentially be seeing a dead lake in the near future. So these are things that we need to think about, and we need to protect our waters.
Right. On that note, there is a question coming in from a person named Bobby Hughes. And so Bobby asks, there are a number of 12 to 13-year-old students who are listening to this amazing discussion. What would be something you would like them to take away?
Well, I want to say that I want them to create art. So, I mean, that's part of our tradition. That's part of who we are as a people. We visually create things to express, to communicate our thoughts and ideas. So that's the one thing that I definitely want to say is don't be afraid of creating, because everybody's an artist, and in our tradition, everybody created, because if you didn't, then you weren't making those connections to the spirits, the ancestors, that sort of thing. So that's the first thing I want people to do.
For me too, I think it would be a good project to see the waters that you're close to or by, and see how it connects to other water bodies around you. And because that's one of the pieces that is in this exhibit is somebody that made a map, right, of all the water bodies and how it all connected. And so to me, I think that would be it would really get the students thinking and even seeing visually what that might look like for them.
Yeah. And also to add too, is that dig up clay from the land and make a vessel, and follow my instructions on Facebook on how to fire. And then it's amazing how it changes your relationship to the land and waters. Aimee?
Okay, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to give you lots of homework. 12 to 13-year-olds, you're so good at research. I love the stuff that you come up with. So I'm going to ask you, if you can, if you're interested, go have a look at the Anishabe Declaration. Go find it. It's on, like I said, Grand Council Treaty 3 website or the Decolonizing Water website. We also have another website with a bunch of videos on water teachings. So go have a look at that. And then I think the third piece of homework, because I know you don't have enough homework because you're all working from home, wink, wink, would be, try and figure out what your relationship with water is. Like Sherry said, where your water comes from, but also how you would like to honor that relationship. Because we have different relationships with different people in our lives. So what does that relationship with water look like for you? I've been working with some guardians in different places in the world, and they work on the ground to make sure that people are protecting water. There's people that walk for the water. There's really important women who have done, really amazing work in walking for that water. There's the singing, and there's the praying for the water. There's maintaining those spiritual relationships. There can be, writing letters to your members of parliament or members of the Legislative Assembly and letting them know, voicing your view about, how water might be in danger. It could be, thinking about how you want to do something this summer that directly relates to the water and helping the water. And that could be cleanup of riverbanks or in the rivers. So I think there's an endless list of possibilities, and you're the people that are going to figure out how we're doing this going forward. So I'm really excited that question was asked. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the document that you mentioned, Aimee, we can post a link to that in the comments as well. So people will be able to check that out afterwards. So we only have a couple more minutes left of the talk. Are there any closing comments that you guys would like to wrap up with before we end the talk?
I'll go last.
I think for me, I'll just reiterate what was said. There's dates set for the next water gathering, the big gathering. So come and check it out. Even if you can come for a half hour, an hour, still come and see what it's all about. You'll hear many, many teachings on water. So for me, that's and you'll hear how you can make that contribution back to water. So for me, that's what I have. Like, well, how can we, each and every one of us, make a gift back to water for all the gifts it gives to us?
Yeah, that's well said, Sherry. And I totally agree. And I would say, adding to that is, be comfortable to share with other people what you're doing and to express that, because we learn from each other. And I love hearing stories of what people are doing to support the water, and just share.
And I'm going to end by reading a quote from Chief Seattle, which actually I read this for the first time up in Grand Rapids. There was a plaque that was created and is situated up in Grand Rapids. And it says, "The ancestors tell us, we come from the earth and the earth provides for us. We are alive. And then we return to the earth when we die. The water that flows in the river is not only water, but the blood of your grandfather's grandfather. Whenever light glistens on the water of the lake, it is another memory of your ancestors. The sound of the river are the voices of your relatives. You must look after the earth, so it remains sacred. Teach your children as you might have been taught. The earth is our mother. Whatever happens to our mother happens to the people. So look after it well, so your children's children will see how beautiful it is and love it the same way as we love it."
Thank you. That's a perfect way to end the talk. Thank you, Casey. So thank you to all of our speakers, Casey, of course, Aimee, and Sherry. I know that this was sort of an unusual format to do a talk in a virtual online way, but I'm just so appreciative that you're all able to make time for this conversation. And of course, next week is the live closing performance that Casey Adams will be doing. So same time next week, Thursday, 2 p.m. Central. you can come back onto the AGSM Facebook page and watch Casey do a live performance. Until then, thank you everyone at home for joining us, and take care.
Thank
Bye
you.
everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye from the past. Isn't that an unusual way of conducting these things? It's so usual now.
It's now the new normal.
Yeah. So a reminder that now we can receive any questions or comments from the audience. You can share with us using the comment function on Facebook or YouTube. In the meantime, Casey, I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about that idea of the new normal and the Aimee gathering. I'm sure many of us clutched our chests when Aimee said, oh, just twice as long next year, knowing what we know now. So what's the process or the philosophy that the gathering can employ that might simulate the really embodied work that's intended to accomplish when it's being done virtually?
So I think what's one of the most important things is that we're getting a lot of guidance from elders. And the elders, many of them from Treaty 3 territory, from where Sherry Copenance's territory, a lot of what they were saying is that the importance is the teaching and always putting emphasis on the land. So originally we were going to have some people on the land. That was when gatherings, you could have 20, and then it went down to 10, then it went down to 5, and then it went to none whatsoever. So our original concept was actually to have a sacred fire out on the land, and anyone who's watching knows that, or anyone from this area knows that we were going through a drought, and then there was a fire ban. And one of the most important things is to have that sacred fire, because to start off the Aimee gathering, we would have a sacred fire that starts, and it would be going 24 hours a day until the gathering's over. And it shows our commitment, and it shows to the spirits the importance of what we're doing. And so having this out on the land was really important. And having that sacred fire, like I said, showed our commitment. Well, it was unfortunate that suddenly all of those, the being out on the land and then being able to have the sacred fire was squashed. So the elders, they said, really, it's about getting this knowledge out, and that's super important, that we need to spread that awareness about how important it is to protect waters. And so we came to a point where we just said, it's just going to have to be virtual. And the elders were okay with that. They led the decisions, and it was decided that that's what we needed to do, because really, like I said, the knowledge is what's important. And it's also one of the reasons why the Aimee gathering is about inclusivity. It's about allowing anybody to participate, because we're all in this together. We're all feeling the effects of polluted waters. We're all feeling the effects of animals and that are dying from the effect of these polluted waters. We're seeing so everyone is part of that sort of ecosystem. I like to talk about how Western point of view, often you see the world as a pyramid, where everything is structured in a pyramid, and the most important things are high up in the pyramid, and human beings are at the top of that pyramid. We're the most complex creatures in the universe, and so we therefore are at the top. But from an Indigenous worldview, so an Indigenous point of view, the stars, the sun, the moon, the universe, the spiders, the water, the mountains, the animals, the sky spirits, the earth spirits, and the underground spirits. All of that is connected. So everything is like a spider web, and if you disrupt one part of that spider web, then you're disrupting the whole thing. So it has this ripple effect. So it's understanding that we are part, just one tiny part of that whole structure. And the inclusivity is about understanding that each and every one of us are responsible for that spider web, and that we need to work together.
It's something that I have always, as somebody who also works in the arts and occasionally makes art myself and all these things, that the real labor of it, I'm starting to think, is pulling metaphors out of abstraction and breaking down that binary between literal speech or actual and symbolic. You know, like, these are not metaphors. These are, I really liked in the video you just made about collecting clay, you talk about how clay is sticky. That's one of its qualities. And you say, if it's sticking to your boots, then you know, anything that sticks to your boots as you're walking around ashore is clay. And suddenly that idea of the water activating this innate quality of clay, right? As though it's trying to find you, as though it's trying to emerge from beneath, you know, the sandier bits of sediment. And so that makes me wonder how much of the work of the Nibe gathering and water keepers and knowledge keepers is that same kind of work. It was so interesting in the meeting of the three of you that we just watched, how you have the same perspective, but you have very different approaches maybe to that same goal. So what are the techniques that you use to break down that binary as an educator?
Right. So, you know, I went to Concordia University. I went through the public school system. I was raised with a public school public education, just like pretty much anyone else that the same age as me had. And so I wasn't raised with my culture, and I didn't really understand. Well, the Western point of view is that only special people can create art, and that artists have a unique way of looking at the world. Sometimes, you know, when you think of the stereotype of an artist, is that there's mental illness attached to it, but that they see things differently and that they're special. So this was the environment that I was raised, and this was the environment that I moved forward as an adult into the art world and practicing my work. What changed for me was meeting Indigenous knowledge keepers, some of my friends who would take me to ceremony, and people like Sherry Farrell-Rosette, Kathy Mattis, Nadia Mir, Faye Heavyshield, all the Cheryl Learendell, all these incredible women. What they made me really understand is that art is a form of communication, and the knowledge keepers have taught me that art is our way of communicating to the spirit world, to the ancestors. Art talks about who we are as a person, where we come from, land knowledge, water knowledge. So art has this ability to communicate all this information. And once that concept came to me, it made me realize how everything is connected. And it made me realize also that I was following in the footsteps of my ancestors because I worked in so many different mediums. And my ancestors also created a lot of different objects that was necessary. But it wasn't just to create for utilitarian reasons. Imagery was placed on a lot of these objects for specific reasons and for spiritual reasons, but also to tell other community members who you are, where you come from. So once I started having that in my thought process, and just sort of abandoning this idea that only special people create art, that my perspective is just as important as the person next to me, and that we're all really just trying to communicate who we are and where we come from. And so coming from an educator's point of view, I started taking those philosophy, that Indigenous worldview, into the classroom, and I started giving children permission, and even the teachers, giving them permission to be able to express themselves, because the Western point of view of what makes an artist is very dangerous. And I like to think that during this pandemic, lots of people have picked up things like knitting and sewing and different crafts. People are trying watercolors. People are trying different methods because they're able to get these virtual experiences, but they also want to connect to their creative side. And so it's a way of communicating who they are. And so I bring that into the classroom. And what's really fascinating is it's the teachers that really benefit them, I'd say the most. Like they experience a big change compared to the students. The students already kind of get it, especially when they're from anywhere from kindergarten to grade 4 or 5. They already get this idea that art is for them and that they can do it. Once they start getting from grade 5 up, that's when people stop doing art, right? So with the teachers, it's a revelation for them. I give them permission to create, and for them it's like an incredible experience. And so it's really for myself, it's thinking about knowledge and how I'm going to put in knowledge into my work. And I like to call myself a social practice artist. And I created Perception photo series that talked, that gave a voice to my Indigenous community, the Métis community and the Inuit community. And so I was working with a group of people who were willing to share and tell their stories. Well, with Gage'gajiwaan, this show, this exhibition, I was giving a voice to water. And so I still consider it a social practice work. The difference being is that I'm working for water and giving water that voice in a visual way. I hope that answers your question. Sorry, I'm a little long-winded.
More than. I want to try to kind of wrap up at the half-hour mark, but I don't want to let you go because this is an art gallery without telling me and our audience about the actual works in Gage'gajiwaan. So I'm very interested because I haven't seen them in person, and the techniques are just
there's one right behind me,
incomprehensible in that digital format because there's so many layers happening. There's so many textures. So can you talk a little bit about just the techniques that you used and just the birch bark technology concept in general?
Right. So I really was drawn to birch bark, and I've been working with birch bark for a while. The concept, the idea of birch bark, because birch bark is a technology that my ancestors used. And interesting enough, that technology that they use, such as birch bark canoes, is still being used today. Birch bark teepees were used, birch bark baskets, birch bark biting, birch bark glasses to prevent snow blindness. There's so many different uses of birch bark, and my ancestors used that technology. And so I often think about how the technology that I'm using today is my way of being able to reach more people. And so I wanted to bring those two elements together, the past and the present, but also technology can be used for the future. And so I like to think that this work really talks about past, present, and future, and that there is hope. But it also talks about the land, a lot of the imagery that's in the work. What I did was I took computer photos of circuit boards and scanned images of birch bark and put it together to create almost like a landscape. Oh, there's my cat. Yeah, so I brought it together to create, to be a visual storyteller, to hold that information. And by using the digital information, I'm showing the future and how technology is going to be part of our future as well. And some of the works I actually beaded on top of it. So Sherry referenced one of them. It was like a map that was created by how did it work? There was of course I don't have the information in front of me, so I'm going to forget names.
Let me see if I can grab it. You keep talking. I'm going to see if I can find it.
Yeah, it's the
mainstay of the exhibition. Yes.
Yeah, it was it was a explorer who wanted to know where all the communities were so that they knew how to get to it. And water was our road system. That's how we traveled.
Yeah.
Incidentally, the mouths of these waterways, that was like the best place to find clay. And a lot of communities were named by those locations, those waterways, which I find super fascinating. Oh yeah, you missed it. That one right there. So what had happened was an explorer wanted to know where the communities are, and so it was drawn by and I can't remember his name, but it was drawn, and this is a map of Manitoba, parts of Saskatchewan, and parts of Northern Ontario. And what's fascinating is that how everything is linked together. So it's not a true, what we consider a true map today, but this was the best map at that time, and it showed how we're linked together by water, which I thought was really beautiful.
And it's utterly legible, even without being a map as we understand it, without being about spatial relationships. It's about movement relationships, right? You can absolutely understand.
Yeah, and I beaded. I used beads, and then the next one I painted copper, because copper was we used copper, and we often use it to hold water in. And today in ceremonies we use copper vessels to drink water out of. And the ancestors understood that water, when you hold water in a copper vessel and then you drink it, it feeds and nourishes you. So there may be some missing elements that your body requires, and copper can do that for you. It can give you those elements. So doctors are now saying that, once a week you can pour some water into a copper vessel, let it sit for 15 minutes, and then drink it. And that will help your body, because when you think about it, there's gold and copper in our brains. So I think that's really fascinating. You want to switch to another one? I can talk about that. Yeah, so this one also has copper on the circuit boards.
These are physical additions.
Yeah, and so I sprayed a patina on it, so it's turning turquoise. So it has a really beautiful element to the work, and it adds depth to it. Mm-hmm. And this one reminds me so much of a village. And what was interesting was Sherry Copenance and I created these images, and I'd show it to her, and she would say, this reminds me of this teaching, this water teaching. And so we would then decide, okay, so this water teaching is going to be attached to this piece. So each piece, she has a different teaching, and they're all
these
related
are the words
to
that
water.
she says.
What's that?
These are the words that she says. Is this teaching?
Yeah, I believe with that one, I believe she talks about community.
Okay, everybody should go visit. They're all great. There's an essay by Jenny Western that explains a lot of where you had been coming from before this exhibition and a lot of what this exhibition is about. And do watch those videos. There's something about the sound of Sherry's voice that just it's like everything that exists in a natural space coming together. It's bird song and a cricket and the grass and water. Yeah. There's something very.
Yeah, I often say it's like listening to water flowing over rocks. It just flows, and she has such a beautiful lilt, like her language. It sounds soothing. It's really quite beautiful.
Yeah, so fall asleep to some of those videos that we have up in the virtual gallery. And I think that I should let everybody go now. I want to thank you so much, Casey, for joining us for this farewell. And wherever you are, Aimee and Sherry, and of course, Alyssa, for putting everything together. Because obviously I have very little to do with this exhibition, but I get to be the one to see it off.
Oh, I was going to show you what I have on, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
It says Decolonize Water. So.
There's Decolonized Water merch available for...
Yeah,
for
exactly.
those who want to support the cause. Yeah. And I think all of those resources that Aimee mentioned are still up and live online.
Yes.
And even better than before, there's a very, very rich website at the Decolonizing Water. Okay, so thanks so much, Casey, and thanks everybody who joined us. I hope to see you all at the AGSM Virtual Gallery again soon. And until then, have a great evening.
Thank you. Ekosani.